What's going on, Creator Factor fam? We're back with another edition of Creator to Creator right here. I have a good friend of mine, which I'm really excited to introduce you to. She is somebody who I worked with in the past. She's also one of those like rock star podcasters. You know, if you're a consultant or you're a coach, you work with individuals and different clients, and you see those that are just kind of like just the rock stars. Well, this is the rock star who I've actually, again, had the honor of working with. She's also a podcast host of a show called Starlight Pet Talk. And she just brings a lot of great insights as a leader, as a business owner. She's also a president of a nonprofit animal rescue organization. Has a master's degree in communication, over 20 years of experience with organizations. She's worked with like NASA and Texas Children's Hospital. She also has helped organizations build strong teams, hire the right talent, and empower leaders to thrive. And I'm excited, Creator Factor fam, a creator to creator. Let's welcome to the show none other than Amy Castro in the building. Amy, how you doing, my friend?
You built me up too much.
I was about to build you up some more, my friend, because,
Oh
you
my
know,
gosh.
I have a lot of love for you. And, you know, as I mentioned, Amy, that, you know, we met at, where did we meet? We met at a Pod Houston event, didn't we? How did we meet?
You know, I know.
Was
I
it through
don't
the
really
group?
know now that I
Okay.
think about it.
I was thinking about that. I was like, how do we meet? And I want to say, I know you attended last year's Pod Houston
Yeah,
event.
I did, but I think we kind of met virtually more than anything else because I had stumbled across Pod Houston and thought, you know, what an awesome thing. And you are Pod Houston
Yeah.
so, you know, I think we got chatting that way, and then I got sucked in at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you've been not only a rock star podcaster, but also a rock star community member, always sharing love. So shout out to Pod Houston. Shout out to Amy for always, again, I want to acknowledge you for always being involved in the conversations, welcoming people. I know I mentioned this to you before, but I want to give you your flowers for that because I think that's something that gets overlooked. And as community leaders, we get to see, as you know, the people that want to participate and contribute to the community. So just thank you for being that rock star community member.
Well, thank you for giving us a community to be a part of because
Thank you.
couldn't do it without you.
I'll receive that, my friend. Let's talk podcasting because, you know,
Sure.
your background is in communication, which when I was digging, again, I met you as a podcaster. And then when I was doing some digging, some research, I was like, oh, wow, she has a master's degree in communication. Makes total sense that she has a podcast, right? And you're great at it. When was the first time you discovered this whole thing called podcasting?
Well, I mean, I think I had kind of obviously heard about it when it first started coming out. And I remember thinking, awesome, I don't have to do my hair. I could do a podcast. But I think like a lot of people probably do is you start getting that, whether, you know, part of it's imposter syndrome, like who am I to get, you know, to put content out there and expect that people are going to listen to it and think I know what I'm talking about. And then, you know, when you start diving into investigating it, then it's like, oh, well, what is the best microphone or what is the best this? And you kind of get that analysis paralysis, for lack of a better cliche. So I waited a long time to actually get started and dive into it, but it's been a couple of years. I can't say exactly when.
So what inspired you to start the podcast Starlight Pet Talk?
Well, as you mentioned, I run a nonprofit animal rescue. It's called Starlight Outreach and Rescue. And I spend a lot of time personally on the outreach part. I have tried to, you know, get out of the day-to-day trenches and kind of get a higher level view of things. And I spend a lot of time on the phone and responding to emails from people who are pretty desperate about problems with their pets. They're trying to rehome their pets for a variety of reasons. I'm moving, pet has a behavior problem, it's growling at people, whatever it might be. And I thought to myself, well, I can have 2 or 3 conversations a day times, you know, 7 days a week and help 21 people, or I can take that conversation to a podcast and hopefully help more people and, you know, put those issues out there. Because if you're struggling with something with your pet, there's probably thousands of other people who have the same concern or problem.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really stood out about your podcast early on. It was very niche. You know, it was speaking to, you know, pet parents, as we called it. We called it as pet parents, right?
Yeah.
And really just answering those questions because definitely the pet industry is actually, it's niche, but it's a very huge industry, especially here in the States. A lot of money being poured into this industry. And, we love our fur, babies. And we want to make sure that we have the right information to give them the proper care. So I felt like your
Definitely.
podcast really served that community. And I thought it was really interesting that you launched that. It was actually one of the most interesting podcasts that I was able to work with. So I was honored to be a part of that. Let's talk about the whole podcasting thing, because, with your background in communication, Amy, I'm curious to know, was there anything that you learned, like any skill sets that you learned from podcasting all these years that, that I want to say validated, but made you just, you learned some things that podcasting taught you that you didn't learn in school?
I think a lot of it has to do with just the interaction with people. The
Yeah.
school aspect tends to be fairly formulaic, in like journalism as an example. It's you write an article, you write it in descending order of importance, and you answer the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And it can be very structured like that. And what I have found is that although people appreciate the structure, they like the unstructured just as much. They like it better. And I learned this a little bit through blogging too. When I put on my Amy Castro professional communicator voice, whether it is the way, talking in an interview or the way that I was writing,
Yeah.
it's well received, but people really like it when I'm me,
Yeah.
which is not always a good thing or all that professional. But, I think just being real, finding that balance between achieving the goal that you're trying to achieve with your podcast episode, because you don't want it to be completely random and people are done listening to it and think, what did I just hear? Did I learn anything
rambling
from that? Yeah, it's just a
Right.
bunch of rambling.
Yeah.
But at the same time, not being so overly structured that it doesn't feel conversational. It feels like you're watching a newscast or something like that.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things that was intriguing about this whole space, because I just love the conversations. I love the fact that, yeah, sure, as you mentioned, there's a level of there's craft involved in the art of the interview and making sure you're well prepared, as you know this, and being able to articulate and communicate your questions and be a good conversationalist. But that's one of the things that I discovered about podcasting is, I was a bit of an introvert growing up. And one of the things that podcasting taught me was just allowing myself to be more of myself and just be like, okay, dude, just relax and have a conversation, and to have better conversations. I think it makes for better podcasting. So I love that you mentioned that, because I feel like we've heard the very formula, very framework kind of like TV show or radio coming into the space. I'm like, that quite doesn't work with podcasting. It's just the beauty of podcasting is that it's raw and conversational, which is the reason why, we talked about this in the green room, is that I really wanted to have this segment where it's just like creator to creator, like just have conversations. Let's just loosen up and just have conversations about, the things that, the journey of being a creator, which, speaking of which, of the journey of being a content creator, you also run an organization. What's that been like? Because a lot of creators that are watching, listening, we have day jobs, we got side hustles, we got a lot of domestic obligations, how do you balance, being a content creator, serving your clients and your community, and also doing everything else, that you got going on with the organization?
If you want the honest answer
Yes, give us honest.
The honest answer is, I don't think I do it as well as I should be doing it. It's because I have so many different responsibilities. And so there are times where it tends to be more reactive than proactive. And I tend to focus on what do I like to do? Like, I'd much rather be sitting here having this conversation with you than making cold calls for my speaking and training business, which my communication expertise is what pays the bills. And I will be honest and say that has kind of taken a back seat to the rescue, and then to the podcast as an offshoot of the rescue. And I need to rearrange that. When your bank account starts getting low,
Yeah.
you realize I
get it.
need to refocus a little bit. But I think also time management is a huge piece of it, and providing, creating some structure for yourself, whether it's, something as simple as a daily to-do list, or keeping things on a schedule, like being consistent and knowing, I know my podcast is going to come out every Tuesday morning at 4 a.m. Central Time. And so, I do have a plan and a schedule of when I'm going to be doing interviews and when the editing is going to get done so that I can hit that date that episode is supposed to release. And sometimes I am weeks ahead. And sometimes, like this week, I'll be perfectly honest, I recorded next Tuesday's episode yesterday.
It happens.
It happens.
I get it.
Yeah. But being self-employed, I have the flexibility that if I want to be working on my podcast over the weekend or doing my work over the weekend, I can do that. So I think being self-employed helps, but it's a constant reassessment of your priorities and saying to yourself, my favorite question in the entire world. In fact, my daughter wrote a college essay about having a productivity gene, is to ask myself, is this the most productive use of my time? And of course, I ask everybody around who's, if you're laying on the sofa, I'm going to walk over and say, is that the best thing you could be doing with your time right now? Could you be doing something more productive with your time?
That should be like a sticky note for all
I know.
creators.
I know, because you can go down rabbit holes. I mean, I can get on Canva and be working on the social media artwork. And it's like, is that the best use of my time? Or is good enough? Or should I hire somebody to do that? Because that's a better use of my time, even though it's going to cost me.
So what are the things you mentioned that you recorded the new episode yesterday? What are the things you're doing to stay organized? Like if you were to, like, let's say, break down the perfect structured workflow and the way you do things, like how do you structure? Are you using any tools? Are you a planner, like to-do lists? Are you a sticky note person? Like how do you stay organized to the best of your ability?
Yes, I don't like sticky notes. And actually, I teach a time management and personal productivity class, which is good for me to remind myself.
Okay.
But I think sticky notes are bad because, you can end up with a sticky note on your butt and now your sticky note's gone. I mean, they tend to...
I just walked one. There was actually one on the floor. I was like, where's that?
Yeah, they end up everywhere. And then you end up with a to-do list on your nightstand, a to-do list on the kitchen counter, and one at work. So I like to keep things in one place. For the show, what I basically do, and this is, very, very basic. I have a spreadsheet in Google Drive, which I do have a young lady, Cassidy Matlock, who is helping me do a lot of the editing for the podcast and doing some of the Instagram clips, things like that. So that's accessible to her. It's accessible to my daughter, who's kind of my part-time admin. So everybody knows what I should be doing and when. And I have, I lay out my episodes as I come up with the ideas of what I want to do. I'll put them in, maybe not with any dates. And then, the next column is basically, who am I going to be interviewing or chatting with about that subject? So I've got to build in now time to reach out and find those people if it's not somebody I already know. A recording date column, and an air date column. So I kind of know what at least I have planned coming up, and whether it falls through or not, or whether somebody reaches out to me randomly, like the podcast episode that I recorded yesterday was on fear and aggression in rescue dogs and how do you manage that. And that was not on my radar per se, but it fit with this, fit with the schedule, fit with the timeline. And so I just plugged it in. So I think having at least a plan so you know what you're shooting for, but then being flexible enough to say, if that fits, we'll put it in.
Podcasting is such and we talked about this numerous times, it's such a slow burn, and it's one of the mediums out there that it's hard to grow. Like it's not one of those where and I tell new podcasters all the time, I'm like, look, if you think it's like, build it and they will come, I'm like, think again. Because it's not like that, especially in an audio podcast, right? So discoverability has always been a key challenge for podcasters to grow their show. So it's tough. It's slow burn. I mean, you can't just be interested. You got to be really committed to investing in the podcast.
Yeah.
You've been in the game for quite some time, Amy. And that's one of the things, like I've seen you, invest in yourself and try different things. And we have conversations off air that are very about like, wait, what's working, what's not. Let's talk about video. Let's talk about audio. Through all that, you're still pushing the content. You're still involved in the community. What keeps you motivated, my friend?
I think it's knowing that the content that I'm putting out there is actually helping people. I know that for a fact because I get feedback from people. Just as an example, I did a podcast episode where we talked about adopting, finding I'm a big believer in right fit. Just because Ozeal has a certain type of dog and he loves it, doesn't mean it's a good fit for my lifestyle or my activity level or whatever it might be. If I'm 85 years old, there's a certain fit pet. If I'm 25 years old, there's a certain fit pet. And so I focus on that a lot. And when I get feedback from somebody, I had a lady that reached out to me, an older lady who actually listens to my podcast from my website because she said, I can't figure out the whole podcast, the Apple, the Spotify, all of that. So she listens to it from the website. And we had talked about, if you're older and you want to adopt a puppy, obviously you should think that through, because if that puppy is going to outlive you, as an example, then what's going to happen to it? Because I am the one that's getting the calls every day. Grandma died, my mom died, my uncle died. They've got 3 dogs. We need to, go back home. Can you take them? And so when somebody reaches out to me, and she actually called me and said, I had never thought about that. My husband and I are in our 70s, late 70s. We just, our dog had passed away. We just adopted a puppy, and we had not even thought about what would happen to that puppy if we passed away. And now we are thinking about it, and we're creating plans. And that, to me, my 100% goal with this podcast is to keep pets in good homes, keep them off the streets, keep them out of shelters. And so,
Love
that's
it. Simple.
Yeah, it's very, very simple, but it's the feedback that I think really, really keeps me going.
It's interesting that you say that, because that's one of the things with podcasting is it's one of those platforms where it's like a faceless community. You always want to point people back to the show notes. And back then when I started, it was very heavy where you're like, head over to, let's say, starlightpettalk.com/so-and-so and leave a comment. And that would be like a very common call to action for a lot of podcast hosts, is like, bring them in. And you would want people, because we as podcast hosts wanted engagement. We want to know that our listeners are there, because we see the download numbers, but nobody's comment. It's just a weird, it's just an interesting relationship with your listeners, but they're listening. Like they're, as it's like, they'll come out of the woodworks and be like, hey, this episode really resonated with me. And it's one of those things that I always tell podcasters, specifically, that, when you see 50, 40, 60 downloads, I mean, respect that. Like, that's attention, and that should never be taken for granted. And those are people that are actually listening to you on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
It may not seem much. If you're going for optics, even optics, it really doesn't really show you much. You can have a bunch of downloads, but no engagement. So it's like, you got to respect that and know that there are people there that value what you're saying. I think that's truly powerful. And that's something that you see with podcasting. So
yeah,
I'm glad that you share that. Let's talk about content marketing, because curious to know, you've been in the game for quite some time, and, you have a master's in communication, and you've been a part of different organizations. Are you seeing like a trend? Because I know what I'm seeing is just like a trend with content marketing. You're seeing a lot more organizations that you typically don't see, and even like business owners that you normally don't picture them creating content, but now they're embracing what we do, whether it's starting podcasts or starting a YouTube channel. Now they're embracing that creator mentality. Are you seeing a trend in your space of more organizations, more leaders in your industry that are now embracing content as a form to market their message?
Yeah, I think definitely. And when you say my industry, it kind of depends on which industry you're talking about.
Right, speaking
the speaker, the professional
few
speakers and trainers have known that for a long time. Now, whether we do it, or whether we do it well, or whether we do it consistently, and I think consistency is a key thing. That's one thing. But now flipping over into rescue, pet industry, things like that, I think people are getting a little bit more savvy about how that is impacting their bottom line, because quite frankly, and I don't know if it was the pandemic or if it probably started before that, but certainly intensified, where people are spending more time on their screens, and they are looking for things on their screens, and they are doing, transactions, through online, medium. And so if that's where people are, that's where you need to be. And it's the same thing with social media platforms. It's like, it's not about your favorite platform or where you like to hang out. It's where's your audience hanging out. So that's where you need to be.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I teach that all the time. Good point. You were talking about with podcasting, whereas we're seeing this growing trend of video happening. We're kind of, you and I definitely are audio, and we're very audio focused. And now you're seeing a drive for video. Curious to know like your thoughts on embracing video as a, audio driven podcast first. Now seeing the wave get into video. How are you? Like, what's your take on it? Are you one of those is like, all right, nah, it's audio only. I'm sorry, everybody can do that, but I'm going to do this. Or are you saying, okay, there's an opportunity here to be able to kind of market this to a different audience? What are your thoughts on the whole video marketing podcasting thing that's happening right now?
Well, I would say my first thought is it makes me sad because the whole reason I was drawn to podcasting in the first place is so I didn't have to do my hair, or put on makeup, or whatever it might be, or worry about looking at my camera. So
I know that's a
I'm
challenge.
seeing you on my screen.
I know.
But here's my trick though. On my video camera I put googly eyes. So it draws my attention. So I look at the eyes, and so just worrying about like one other thing to worry about other than just sounding good.
Yeah, it's a different craft, right? I mean, it's something we gotta learn. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But no, that's okay. But at the same time, I realize that there is no denying that people want to watch videos. That they, whether it's short form, long form, both. Mm-hmm. We are screen oriented as opposed to audio oriented. Yeah. As a matter of fact, a lot of my audience, because it tends to be for the podcast, for the pet podcast, is it tends to be women, and it's a lot of people that are probably older than the normal podcast listener, and I've almost had to explain it to, like, remember back when your grandparents were kids and everyone would sit around the radio and listen to whatever it might be. I mean, they did soap operas and things like that, audio plays, for lack of a better term, back then. And it's like, that's kind of what podcasting is it's like sitting back and listening to a conversation on the radio, or eavesdropping on a conversation, because they just don't, like, it's hard to relate to the concept because we are so television and screen oriented. So I don't see why we can't do both. I mean, it's not, obviously if you want to do video on a high level, that's a whole nother ball of wax. But at the same time, when I'm doing my podcast, I'm recording the audio and the video. I put the video up on YouTube. I use the video clips. I mean, the video clips alone, even if you didn't want to put your entire episode out there, the video clips alone are a huge draw. And you can see the numbers. I mean, there's no denying the numbers of how many people watch that clip versus, if you just put an audio clip out there. So people want to see that there's a real person behind it, I think, too. And one last thing I say too, I mean, other than today, and it's not because I wanted to look nice for you, Ozeal. It's because I have to go somewhere else afterwards. But normally when I do the podcast, it's like, no makeup. I don't dress up. I wear my rescue T-shirt, and it's like, take me as I am. Yeah.
The real you, the real Amy Castro.
Me. And if you don't like me, then my podcast is probably not for you.
There you go.
And
Amen.
As niche as pet podcasts are, because there are lots of them, you're going to find one that you like. If you don't relate to me, you don't like my face, then go find somebody else. It's okay.
Are you still consuming your podcasts audio only, or has your consumer behavior changed?
I do a little bit of both. If there's something intriguing about what I'm listening to, I'll go look for the video. But yeah, it's to me, it's a convenience factor to be able to just pull it up on my phone and listen to it, or listen to it while I'm doing other things. Consuming in the car, that's probably my biggest listening place.
Yes, I'm asking that because I've been having conversations with a lot of creators lately, and I'm noticing, even as an OG, like, audio listener, RSS, app download type of guy, I am seeing, Amy, that my consumer behavior has been changing a bit. Like, I'm noticing, like, if I'm hanging out in the kitchen, I will, like, have my laptop propped up open, watching and listening to I'm washing dishes, and before I'm just like plugged in, but now, like, I'll glance over and I'll look. So I'm actually watching more podcasts and listening to podcasts on YouTube now. And data is showing that that's where the wave is going. That is not only podcasting great or YouTube is powerful for discoverability for new podcasts, right? Because if your show's on there, you're going to see other people. I mean, they're going to be, if they're a pet parent, they're going to be shown different types of content. And because you're part of the RSS on YouTube, they will show you eventually your content if you're consistent and they feel like there's a topic that can relate to them, because there's a bunch of AI tools. It's been getting crazy what YouTube is doing. But anyways, going back to my point, I'm watching and listening more on YouTube. I'm like, what's happening? Like, I used to just listen on my phone, and I still do, but I'm noticing my behavior has changed completely. So I think that's I think embracing, the video and not denying that it's something that as creators we have to embrace and adapt to. I think it's important for us to market ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I don't necessarily understand, what is the resistance to it,
Because it's all about the RSS and it's audio only, and
Okay, then
we're
you can be that
purists.
way.
But you know what?
And you know what? Blockbuster thought the same thing. It's all about this.
Good point. Good point. That's a good point. That's a
Yeah.
really, really freaking good point.
Well, one thing I want to say too
Yeah.
about that, because I was thinking about this as I was flying home the other day.
Mhm.
Think about this. The last time you were on an airplane and they had do the safety announcements, right? The flight
Mhm.
attendants are standing in the aisle. They are telling you how to keep from burning and dying in an airplane wreck. And what
Right.
are you doing? You're looking at your phone. You're looking at something else. You're having a conversation. And the airlines have figured this out. If they take that same presentation and put it on a video on the screen in front of your face, people are staring at the video. I mean, it's just the consumption is there. I sat there and I watched
Interesting.
a United Airlines flight. They're talking about the safety thing. There's a little ball that's rolling on a track, knocking down dominoes. They're doing something visually to keep your brain entertained, but you're listening to the audio. But half the time the only time I ever actually listen to the flight attendant is if they're standing right in front of me and I feel
Right.
rude by not making eye contact. So there's no denying that the video is getting people's attention. And why would you
Yeah.
not take advantage of both? I mean, that's just nuts.
That's interesting. That's really interesting that actually I didn't think about that, but you're absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Very cool. All right. Got me thinking. That's true. And again, it's right because I think that's where it's going. It's video, video, video. People are still listening. And again, I do feel like I was talking to a friend of mine and he wants to start a podcast. And, when I was listening to him, I was like, you could do the video thing, for clips or whatnot. I was like, I think it's audio. And I think audio is still kind of like the blue ocean right now, meaning that I think that if you do and dominate audio and just stick with the guns of like, all right, I'm going to do audio, I think there's also a great opportunity there as well because everybody is doing video. But I think having a good audio storytelling show is also something that could be a very interesting zag where everybody's zigging, type of thing. So I think there's still room for audio only podcasts.
Yeah.
And I'm a part of a network that's heavily into audio only. And it's, we're seeing a lot of success. So audio is not dead, y'all. Video is there. We got to use it for marketing. I get it, but audio is definitely not dead. So, let's talk a little bit about the podcast, because I think this is something that a lot of creators who are watching and listening to this could relate to, pivots, whether it's a pivot in your business or changing up the name of your show. This is something that I recently went through not too long ago. I feel like I have one of these episodes probably like quarterly, Amy. It's like, is the show right? Should I change the show? But sometimes, rebrands are okay. I always say that sometimes your first show is not, I say 99% of the time isn't going to hit. I say that. It's like, go ahead and launch it because there's a high chance that you will rebrand or let go of the show. And think about your favorite TV shows. I mean, sometimes they pivot, right? It's a series, it's episodic, or it's, and after a while they ditch it, right? And they rebrand or they do a different pivot. So I'm curious to know, you're going through something right now, and I kind of want to dig into the kind of the mindset of a pivot, and also the, even the things that were concerning for you with Starlight Pet Talk. Can you talk to us a little bit about the whole mindset of rebrand pivots, and for creators out there who are watching, listening, some tips for them, as far as like embracing the pivot and not being afraid of it?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
So I think pivots can come from many different directions. I know when I originally started, and it really hit me when I went to PodFest, because what do you talk about other than your podcast, your podcast, or what you have in common with the other person? And when I started the podcast, I definitely wanted it to be a part of, like, I constantly use the phrase, it's the, part of the education arm of Starlight Outreach and Rescue. And I wanted it to have that affiliation. The challenge is that anytime people said, so, tell me about your podcast, the conversation always went, well, it's called Starlight Outreach and Rescue, and it's called Starlight because, and as a journalist and as somebody that has a background in communications, if you have to immediately explain your title, that's a red flag. And I knew it from the get-go. But I thought, okay, I can overcome that with the explanation, and I'm going to do it anyway because I want that strong affiliation with the rescue. I want it, and it works real well within my rescue. When people see Starlight Pet Talk, they know exactly why it's called that. So that's one piece. But over time, sometimes things change. Sometimes you want to and I'll just be perfectly honest. I'm saying this before I'm saying this on my own show. Although I have been hinting at the change, is that sometimes you'll get to a point where in my personal evolution, I want to distance the podcast from the rescue. I want to be maybe I want to drop a few bad words. Maybe I want to be really honest and say, well, if you do that, you're a moron and you shouldn't have pets. I can't say that when I'm representing the rescue because I'm representing a business entity. But if I'm just being Amy Castro, I can say different things. So that's, if you decide you want to completely change the way you go about your podcast, then, and especially if it's affiliated with a business, you might want to make that rebrand and create that distance. So that's part of it. And then for me personally, I have found that I've been doing rescue work for 14 years, and it has overly dominated my life to the point that it has negatively impacted my health, my business, my personal life. And so I had an epiphany as I was sitting at the edge of my swimming pool during Hurricane Beryl, crying because I live on a 7-acre animal rescue ranch. I am trying to keep these animals alive, keep them from blowing away, keep the sick ones from being sicker. And it hit me that I can't do this anymore. I can't do it anymore. I'm just, the real thing was I don't have to, I don't have to run a rescue. I don't have to live on a 7-acre rescue ranch. And once I kind of made that decision, and we're going through the whole transition right now in the rescue, then I realized I don't have to, it doesn't have to be Starlight Pet Talk. It can be something different. And so that, that's another reason for a rebrand, is when you realize I really need to take everything in a different direction.
Tell me about what's been the biggest challenge. And well, before I get to the question, let me there's a few things that I want to touch on. You mentioned that it's okay. One approach for the creators that are watching, listening, is that one approach is you definitely want to, there's the branded podcast is what they call, right? It's more aligned with the organization or business. If you're a business owner who is running a podcast, Trader Joe's has a podcast. Did you know Trader Joe's has a podcast? It's crazy. It's called Insider Trader Joe's.
Everybody's got a podcast.
I know,
now.
right? It's crazy, which I love. They're doing it right. And then what I'm hearing from you is, there's also a time where I love that you said that if you have to explain it, because your people will get it, but if you're trying to reach a new audience, and I felt like you probably hit a ceiling where it's like, okay, yes, I've gotten up to where it's at, but now I'm trying, you see the growth kind of stagnant, right? And try different marketing things. And it's like, okay, what do I need to do? And sometimes it's like, okay, new listeners won't be attracted to Starlight. They're going to be like, what is that? It's not going to attract them. So a rebrand, shifting the messaging could attract new listeners and kind of take that particular show still to a whole different level, with new audiences being attracted to the message rather than, again, like you said, trying to explain, right? So that's kind of a bit of what you wanted to do moving forward. That it's hard, Amy, I was just thinking, I know with me, I started a show called No Permission Needed, and I don't think I've shared this with you, and I've shared it with a couple friends, close friends, and I haven't shared it out, but I was really in this back and forth with No Permission Needed. It was a very mindset, personal development type of podcast. And then when I did Creator Factor, it was like, all right, well, I'm going to do this. The scary part for me was just they could kind of be the same thing. No Permission Needed could still be a declaration for creators. And I was just going back and forth, well, yeah, but creator has the SEO and it has the keyword, and it's more, again, to your point, more specific to the audience that I'm trying to attract, right? When they see the word creator, they're like, that could be a podcast for me. I'm a creator. So I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think there's different levels to it, but I also went through the same thing. And I know it's scary as hell to kind of go through a rebrand and change. Where are you at right now? Are you going to be changing? Is the mindset changing the format, the interview style? Is it going to be solo shows? the artwork? I mean, take us down to like what the brand is looking like right now.
Sure. So the artwork is definitely changing because the artwork is heavily branded around the Starlight colors, the Starlight logo, the graphics that we use, the fonts that we use. So it's definitely going to be a change from that perspective, and be probably more of a reflection of my personal favorite colors, things like that. So there's definitely going to be that change. And as we mentioned before, as mentioned to you before in the green room, I come from an old school journalism background, so the interview format is a structure that feels safe and comfortable to me, and it keeps me on track, keeps me from getting too random, whatever the case may be. But I'm going to try to make that shift because I have found, as I look back through my stats for my episodes, the ones where, and a lot of them are the ones that I am on with my best friend. Sometimes I'll have her, quote unquote, interview me, or we'll just have a conversation or a year end or whatever it might be. And people love those. I get a lot of a lot of good feedback on those because they're funny and they're more fun. They're not like sitting in a lecture. So I'm going to try to do more of that. And I've always done kind of a mix, but it's a very heavily leaning towards interview. It's probably at 90% interview, 10% solo episode, and it's usually a rant that I have or whatever it might be. And they're a lot shorter. But when I look at the numbers, the numbers are just as good for those 20-minute. Amy just wants to give you, 10 things that bug her about animal adopters.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna lay that out there. So I think a mix is good. I think people like that variety. And then, there's going to be a name change, and I'll go ahead and reveal it.
Oh, well, the drum roll.
And this was a struggle too, because you listen to the advice, right? The experts, and a lot of the advice says don't pick. Oh, I already had the issue with Starlight, right? Like, what does it mean? Now I have to explain it. Don't pick a crazy name. So it would be really easy to say, okay, I'm just going to call it the Pet Podcast, which there probably already is a podcast called the Pet Podcast.
I'm sure.
Yeah, but I kind of just kept playing with ideas, and I came up with the fact that I want to be more real. I want to be more real me. I want to be more real about pets. I don't want to have this, if you're the perfect pet parent, this is the way your life is going to be. No, it's about muddy paws and hairballs. That's what your life is. And that's what the podcast is going to be called, Muddy Paws and Hairballs.
Yeah, I love it. I love the name. What advice would you give for new podcast creators getting into this space? Something that you wish you would have known when you first started? Well,
the easy thing is just start. Don't get so bogged down in doing the research, because I did that, and I do that over everything. It's just like overthinking. I want the best microphone. I want the best this. I've got 3 other microphones sitting here that were way more expensive than the one that I'm using, and this is the one I started with because I finally convinced myself not to overanalyze it and just get a good mic. I already had a decent camera for my speaking work, and just get started with it. Just start taking the steps to get the thing rolling, because you can analyze it to death and you'll never get started. You'll still be thinking about it, or, what ifing it for the rest of your life.
amycastro.com and then starlightpettalk.com, which, by the way, I'm sure obviously that's going to be changing the URL. So you have to make sure that you keep me posted. Did you get the URL, by the way, Amy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's muddypawsandhairballs.com.
There it is. There it is. We'll make sure we link that up. Well, this is going to be launched next year, right? So it'll be launched.
I'm going to be doing a big announcement and explaining why, and then I'm going to take a break, which I'm a little afraid to do, because I don't do shorter seasons. I do the whole year.
Yeah.
50 episodes, whatever it might be. And then I take a little break over the holidays and get started. But I'm just going to be honest with my audience. This is why I'm taking a little bit longer break this time. This is what you've got coming. The beauty of podcast is it's going to live forever. And so, it'll give people a chance to go back and, listen to podcasts I recommend, or listen to episodes that they missed, because people have very different listening habits. Some feel like they have to listen sequentially. Some just randomly pick. And so they can do what they want in the interim and know that I'm coming back, because they've had fair warning.
This is so timely, Amy. I'm gonna share 2 tips. All right. So you need thinking. Number 1, because I went through this, and here is a big no mistake, is that when you go on a creative hiatus, you put the podcast on a break or YouTube channel, let your audience know. So exactly what you're doing, Amy, is the advice that I always tell podcasters is You let them know you're going to take a break. They're forgiving. It's life. We're human. They understand that we all need breaks, as long as you let them know and not ghost. I think that's very, very, just don't do that. That's a big
Right.
mistake, right? And I learned the hard way. So don't do that. And then number two, for creators out there, especially for podcasters, if you're going to take a break, take that time, take a day where you're just pulling out some of the best performing podcasts. And Amy, we talked about this, right? It's like you could do like the best stuff series, or you could just get the best content that's performing well and just schedule them out, like publish. So still promote your backlog. So I see also podcasters take a break and they take a hard break, which I get, you're taking a break, but they don't do anything for the show. And I'm like, man, this is an opportunity. If you could just take a day of just getting all your best content and then just schedule them out in a scheduling tool like, Metricool or Buffer, and then just, get it off your plate, get it off your hands, and just schedule them out. Do some captions, and now you're still promoting the podcast and you're promoting the backlog. So those are two tips that I always share with new podcasters. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I took a break. I made a major mistake. And then it's like, just let your people know, hey, I'm going to take a break. I will be back on this date. And I think that's something that everybody understands and appreciates. So,
yeah. And when you're doing that day, if you take, my plan is, and we'll see if it works. I'm either going to do it with my friend Bev, because we do our year-end wrap-up of like what were our favorite episodes and why. But just, get on and record a minute or two to lead into that quote unquote old episode and say why you picked it, why you wanted people to listen to it again. What have you learned about it? Something about, or why it's your favorite. I don't care, but say something about it that lets them know, yes, I'm still here. And, here's why I like this episode. Yeah. It's just, rather than just reposting it.
Love it. Love. Amy, it's been a little slice of heaven, my friend. As I like to say,
I always enjoy my time with you. You're always so upbeat and positive. You get me all motivated once I talk with you.
That's the type. That's what I'm talking about. Bringing that energy, Amy.
That's right.
And again, my friend, you're one of my favorite podcasters, and I say that not because we work together, and you're an amazing community member at Pod Houston, but because you are such a generous, great communicator, great storyteller, great podcaster, and you really invest in yourself, and you're very committed to the platform. And I believe everything that you've done in you being a business owner and your animal rescue in the podcast, there's a level of excellence that I've seen in you throughout. And even when I do the research and see all the things that you're doing. And then, so I know this new podcast is going to be successful. I'm excited for you, my friend. I look forward to bringing you back so we can do another creator to creator segment where we talk about post rebrand and some of the things that you learn. So this is not going to be the last time that we connect on the pod. So we have to stay in touch. Okay.
Definitely. And I appreciate all those kind words.
Absolutely. All right. We'll make sure that we link everything in the show notes. Thanks again for checking out Creator to Creator. Stay tuned for much more. Thanks.